Are you sitting there right now using a PC with an overpriced operating system while you eat unhealthy ramen? Well, I apparently have all of the solutions to your life. Go to Vite Ramen right now and get their healthy protein-filled ramen for 10% off with offer code BrokenSilicon. And then go to CDkeyoffer.com to get 25% off all Windows keys and use Die Shrink to get 3% off everything else on the website. And we'll talk about these sponsors more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined by my co-host,
Dan.
How are we doing, Dan?
Pretty good, I suppose. How are you doing, Tom?
I guess good. It has been such a roller coaster of a year for this channel, and I think for our family personally, but I'd say, and I think I sometimes, take people off guard when they're like, how are you doing? And I actually pause for like 5 seconds and go, above average. And they always look at me like I'm weird. It's like, well, you asked me how I'm doing. I'm actually going to now assess. And my assessment is it's been a good weekend. Pretty good. We saw the movie Blink twice. I mean, my girlfriend thought it was very good.
Did you blink more than 2 times while watching the movie?
I didn't keep track of it, but I have to imagine at least 4 or more times, in fact,
that's a lot
throughout
of
the 2 hours. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a false bill of sales if you ask me, but I don't know. You
certainly every time you go to a movie and there's a title, we should all try to match some sort of directive from the title.
Yeah.
Like we have to act like a cuckoo clock or a bird when we see cuckoo.
Yeah, when I saw cuckoo, I spoke in a German accent and talked about birds the entire time.
Exactly.
The rest of the audience was not happy with me.
No, they thought you were being very annoying.
Yeah, well, there were only 2 other people in the showing, so
okay. Well, so then
who cares? I only ruined 2 people's experiences.
But yeah, I mean, actually, on that note, though, me and you've been talking about this. It's like with Longlegs and Cuckoo and Romulus, and now there's another one, Something Darling. It's like the thriller horror summer is just, I can't believe how many great movies have come out this year so far, especially in that genre.
Yeah, I know. I still haven't seen Alien Romulus, but looking forward to it.
And so I definitely recommend it. And I'm sure nobody will now talk in the comments about which movie they did not like that we did. No, definitely don't give us twice as many comments as usual arguing with us too, by the way. That definitely would not just help the views.
Alien sucked for 38 years, okay?
Yeah, I don't think so. I do have to say, though, I was looking through, because on Hulu now, the Alien series, they very prudently bought it all up right when Romulus comes out. And it is hilarious seeing the naming of some of these movies, like Alien Cubed. It's such a 90s name. Come on. What are we doing?
Hey, man. Somebody has to do fun stuff with exponents every once in a while. I mean, or number stuff, because that was very 90s to just do fun stuff with numbers, and it's why I exclusively call the movie Seven-in, but
yeah, I know, or Mithrigan. I also think that unless it's a very easy to do play on something with how you're spelling something wrong, like, I think a lot of movies now, you can tell they're titling the movie with SEO in mind. Like, Alien Cubed is a horrible name for the modern era where someone might Google it.
Yeah, and I mean,
back then, not as much of an issue or any issue, really.
No, these days, though, you get stuff like Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. So, like, you're reminded that it's a Mad Max movie, even though Mad Max isn't in it.
And so when they put it anywhere online, if someone Googles Mad Max, it pops up. I'm telling you, that's SEO right now they're thinking about.
Oh, I'm sure. But we've now talked about movies for 4 minutes, I think, so we should probably move on.
Absolutely. And we don't have any corrections that I didn't think were either jokes or off subject or anything goofy to open up with. So I think we're actually going to open up just with No opening reader mails, just the first story, which is, well, I guess you could say is not goofy. I'd say it's serious, but actually it is pretty goofy. Story number one, AMD acknowledges borked Ryzen 9000 gaming performance amongst Zen 5 investigations. The controversy around Zen 5's launch performance has done anything but die down. Over the past week, the following developments have occurred. Number one, AMD put out a community update that stated that while Zen 5 is delivering leadership performance across content creation, productivity, and AI applications, this is AMD speaking, not me.
Yeah.
We've heard from the community that they, with good reason, expected even more gaming performance from Ryzen 9000 series than initial reviews showed. We also want to acknowledge and thank the reviewer community for all their testing and feedback. Many of their observations are helping accelerate our work developing future AMD Ryzen firmware updates that will benefit Ryzen 9000 users. For now, an optimized AMD-specific branch prediction code will be available on Windows 11, version 24H2, in preview through the Windows Insider program. And we are working with Microsoft to release this officially as soon as possible. Zen 5 will see the biggest boost with this Windows update, but will also improve performance for Zen 4 and Zen 3 as well. We're collaborating with Microsoft to roll this update on all Windows 11 users soon. And also, friend of the channel, Wendell, stated in a video that's very good, and I recommend everyone watch to see how odd this is and how much investigation is going into solving Zen 5 performance issues. He said, "It sure does look like Windows is flushing cache lines prematurely, and that's causing some weird performance and anomalies. But even if that's true, even if it's a worst case scenario, I don't see the performance getting 10% better overall. Like maybe on the order of 10% at best, but no 25% or 30% uplift." Well, I say that, but then now that I think about it, Far Cry actually does improve in the new Insider build by almost 10%. So the Insider build of Windows does get it a little bit closer to that performance parity with Linux. And then Leo at KitGuru, also a friend of the show, found solid uplifts with Windows 11 Preview that apparently was included, by the way, with Strix laptops, calling into question how this happened and if Microsoft was to blame. I don't know if I agree with Leo on this, although he should be the next guest on the he should be the guest on the next Broken Cellcon, so we'll probably talk about this. But he closes the video by saying he almost wonders, I don't agree with it, this could be intentional or something, because this is just ridiculous that OEMs got this patch and desktop didn't. But I don't know.
I would also say though that, like, still egg on AMD's face, why wasn't this discussed in the initial round of reviews? Because they clearly know the new update, the preview update, improves performance. But
absolutely. And one could wonder if the reason they launched the 9700X and 9600X first is that it had less of an issue with it. Mm-hmm. And so they were hoping the issue would be fixed a week later. Even then, still stupid. Should just launch them all at the end of August, in my opinion. But anyways, there you go. Wendell and Leo's investigations do suggest that while Zen 3 and Zen 4 will also get uplifts soon from Windows updates, Zen 5 should get a higher uplift and could get that gaming uplift from 5 to around 10% more, which is really what we were expecting. But I will say that too, to what Wendell said. I think he's responding to the ridiculous rumors that apparently some people still bring up of a 40% IPC increase. That I'm telling you, people, nobody at AMD said that was going to happen. So anyone who claimed a 40% IPC uplift has zero sources at AMD and is, again, just making crap up. But you know, I think that's why Wendell said don't expect 25 to 30% and kind of was like 10% at best. But look, what we saw in a lot of averages is Zen 5 is 3 to 5% better at gaming on average than Zen 4. Right. So you add 10%. That's I expected 11 to 14% higher gaming performance than Zen 5. So just buy the 10% more. That's all we need for this to get exactly where we expected it to be. But anyways, though, continuing and finishing up this wrap up here, 5 to 10% should get us what we genuinely expected. And meanwhile, AMD has at least openly admitted to the problem and even told PC World in an interview that they were genuinely confused at launch performance as well. But now it seems AMD was able to find an issue where older security mitigations in Windows limited Zen 5's performance, and these mitigations apparently don't really do anything for Zen 5. And new Windows 11 builds removes and adjusts them, producing notable performance improvements in some games. All right. So what did you think of all of these developments, Dan?
From what I can tell, like, I'm glad AMD is taking some amount of accountability, although of course it's always through the marketing speak, where they have to pretend that everything is still perfect.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot better than what Intel has been doing in the past with a far more serious issue, I would say, than a partially borked launch. But it does kind of sound to me like they're trying to sell this as the majority or the entirety of the issue. And to me, it seems like it's more like half, maybe 60%.
Yeah.
But
well, it depends what you say the issue is.
Yeah, I mean, the lack of performance uplift versus like for what they advertise. Because if you're getting performance uplifts with across the board with every generation, even if it's still a bigger uplift than what you got with Zen 5 than with Zen 4 or Zen 3, well, there's still a underlying issue that hasn't been solved unless it's getting all the way to like 10% versus the new patch, older chips. So to me, it just sounds like this isn't the entirety of the issue, even if it's a lot of it.
Most of it, yeah.
And I'm also confused why AMD wouldn't have either put this in reviewer notes to use the new patch if it was already available to the public, which I think it was, or I don't know if it just became available within like the past week or something. Or, like you said in your write-up, just wait until the preview is public, yeah. or wait till August once this is fully out. It really doesn't make sense to me, because like they had to have known that this was a performance killer for Zen 5 because they're shipping laptops with this patch on.
Well, so QH Freddy writes in and says, why is AMD still doubling down on reviewers getting different results when they themselves in the review guide allegedly gave a 5% gain on average and is chock full of really bad tests and hilarious outliers? So QH Freddy, I think it's entirely plausible that AMD had a given level of performance in early testing, and the people putting the review guide together didn't speak to the people that did the testing with the correct software, and they were just like, I don't know, I guess it's 5% hardware unboxed. I cannot, I've been talking about this on the channel a lot over the past 2 weeks. I can't mention enough how disconnected and chaotic things are between marketing, sales, and product management at AMD right now. And I genuinely think there's a chance that you get this testing, they send it to marketing, they put those marketing slides that they show off at whatever it was, Computex, I think. Mm-hmm. And then a separate team in like sales or marketing takes this other test data with final builds and doesn't consult the team about what's going on here and just goes, I don't know, we got 5%. I think that's the types of mistakes I'm hearing AMD made over the past year a lot because of staffing and just communication issues. This is the exact type of situation that would match up with what I've been telling you guys is going wrong at AMD.
Yeah, and if, like we've been talking about that at Intel in the past too, one hand not knowing what the other hand is doing. Well, this could just be the first generation of it showing its beginning to show, and AMD needs to get their shit together then. And
what I've heard in the past few weeks, heads are rolling, and a lot of the issues they had with the development side has already been fixed for Zen 6's launch as well. And then this just brought to the forefront all of the rolling issues. I mean, there's momentum to it, right? If you have all of these mistakes that are made, even if you correct what's causing the mistakes, there's still going to be some momentum from those mistakes rolling into this launch. And I think that now they're coming to terms also, not just with like the design teams communicating with product management, but also the sales and marketing teams. And frankly, marketing people that really shouldn't have a job. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because to me, this really is the first disappointing Zen launch, and it seems to be entirely a self-own. Like, I know Zen 4, some people
was great.
Some people were disappointed by it, but I thought the disappointment was pretty contrived.
Only a 30% performance uplift. Come on.
Yeah, the performance to me, I mean, the disappointment was pretty contrived even early on, and once you had the 7800X 3D out, it was very obvious that Zen 4 was a successful architecture. And this one, it's not bad. It's fine, I guess, but it's weirdly should almost be cheaper than its predecessors.
I mean, if they're going to launch with this performance, yeah. I mean,
so I don't know. It's just almost feels like there's no reason this is out. And I don't want to just start parroting us from last week, but
sure.
I mean, a couple weeks ago. But yeah, you kind of just released a really poorly power-tuned thing with software issues. You didn't tell reviewers what to do, and those are all just compounding issues that make the architecture look far worse than it probably actually is. But you can't really determine if it's actually not good or just a series of dumb mistakes until we're a couple months out, and then maybe the 9700X will be something I would recommend. Yeah,
well, and that's what I want to go back to what I said, where it depends what you're saying the problem is, because there's the marketing and product management segmentation mistakes. The 9700X should be 105 watts. The 9900X should be 170 watts. Frankly, I would almost argue the 9700X should be 120, 140 watts because it keeps scaling all the way to there. And I don't see why not. Who cares? Intel's using 200, 300 watts. Air cooler can still cool that fine. Or this should have been called the 9700 for like $300. But I mean, that is its own mistake. And that alone, if they would have done that, even with these Windows update issues, probably would have in a lot of apps added 5-10%, or it did. I mean, we saw it in Derbauer's testing, and you know, so there's that bucket there of mistakes that's separate from the performance inherent mistakes, which seem to be with scheduling and just in Windows patches. But then I also suspect the third one we're going to find is there probably is this initial Windows patch that's coming out now. I suspect another one coming out before the end of the year that is how it's scheduling threads even more, from what I've heard. Like there is clearly something going on with like how they're loading up cores and threads in an order that might be good for efficiency but horrible for performance on desktop.
Yeah, which that's really not the issue on desktop if you're not like in fusion generator level of heat generation that like Intel can get to at some points.
Right.
And it's just, yeah, to me, I know you say like 140 watts they even could have gone for, but to me, it's just like 105 or 90 to 105 watts is just that area where they're kind of min-maxing on efficiency and performance gain. And I really don't see why that's not the target. I mean, to be fair, you can just turn on PBO and you'll go to like 140 watts. Or we could turn on
eco mode.
Yeah, it's just, I guess the options to overclock are there and they're relatively easy, but dumb mistakes.
Compressed AI Blocks writes in. By the way, I'm noticing almost like half of the people now in the Moore's Law said Patreon are putting AI in their name somewhere, which I honestly think is funny. But he says, Tom, Zen 5 has been disappointing to say the least. And RDNA 3 before that, while having enticing pricing, didn't meet performance targets they were aiming for nor communicated before launch. Is this the start of AMD overpromising and underdelivering with future CPU and GPU releases, or are these just two flukes and growing pains? So what I wrote down to this was, with Zen 3, with RDNA 3, there were last minute issues discovered that lowered performance. With Zen 5, there seems to have not been issues before, but issues that got into the software right around launch, causing Zen 5 to not be fully utilized in Windows. But you look at Linux reviews, and it performs fantastic. Exactly what they communicated, especially in gaming, maybe even more so in gaming, actually. And in fact, in Spec 2017, again, we're regurgitating this way I say it, testing directly shows around a 16% IPC increase. So they delivered what they communicated. The only thing I will say is I do think that Zen 5, maybe they overpromised a little bit how it performed in gaming, but again, we'll have to see if these Windows updates adds even 5 to 10% performance. That's basically what they said. So from my perspective, this isn't indicative. We shouldn't be sure this is the start of every AMD launch being over-promising and under-delivering. Like, let's remember Zen 4 was exactly what they said it would be after RDNA 3 first came out. All of their launches, like the 7800 XT, were fine. Exactly the performance they said it would be. And the fact that the reason Zen 5 has issues and the reasons RDNA 3 has issues are they're for entirely different reasons, makes me think this is just indicative that they've got to get their shit together when it comes to marketing, sales, and product management and communication. This is indicative that there are just parts of the company not talking to each other, to me. Yeah. I will say, though, if Zen 6 or RDNA 4 were to overpromise and underdeliver, then I would say we have 3 data points. This looks like a trend. But you could still say it's communication. Like, marketing doesn't really know what they're selling. They're not really giving great data or,
Yeah, to me, this seems like it's either two flukes that show an underlying issue in the company structure that could definitely develop into a trend. So if you start seeing them fail to deliver on multiple launches, like if RDNA 4 is a disappointment, and God forbid if like X3D is a disappointment somehow, then I would a disappointment
that they overpromised on.
Yeah, then I would start to be getting worried about what AMD is doing. Here, it's over the span of 2 years, they had two disappointing launches that seem like they're mostly going to be corrected for. That to me is just classic AMD being stupid with their marketing. And I'm not going to like forgive them for being bad at marketing a lot of the time, but they have had a tendency to do this going
But
way
how
back.
many times has this happened before? It's shame on you. I mean, come on. Is
Oh,
it not obvious to you, Lisa, that your marketing department sucks?
Oh, I agree. And
you have the money to hire good people. Like,
yeah, and people are going to be suspicious of RDNA 4 when it comes out because of this.
I put that down as a note to say in the podcast at some point. The amount of comments to my, which we'll get to it later, 8800 XT Lake, that were just like, I hope this is true, but after Zen 5, I don't trust anything AMD says, even to themselves. Like, seriously, so many comments. Company-wide, Zen 5 isn't going to hurt AMD, but the damage to like brand with enthusiasts that was completely avoidable. It really is showing up in every AMD video I put out.
Yeah, and they need to get away from the dumb practices that were started after. Why can't I think of who the marketing guy that left? Halleck, right?
Well, yeah, for CPU, and then Scott Herkelman for Radeon.
Yeah, Herkelman.
Just managed Radeon.
To me, they need to like get away from those issues that they've had in their marketing since those departures, where they're putting like up to, which has become a meme, which they keep using that language for some reason.
Pretty bad meme, and it's becoming like NVIDIA, where it's like up to 4 times performance. It's like, in what scenario, NVIDIA? Come on.
Yeah, it just feels. You can tell that you're being marketed to dishonestly when you see that. So they need to stop doing that. And I don't know. I know they internally are like, well, this paints us in the best light. And it's like, well, no, everybody sees through that. Like, oh, up to. So what, one app gets 1.5x performance, and then every other app is what, 15? Sure. Maybe there's one app where it's way better than the previous architecture.
Jensen Wang, who's not anti-competitive, that's his name, says, it's not a new issue, but should there be more effort overall to differentiate between products and architectures? Ryzen 9000 desktop clearly had problems, but Zen 5 is meanwhile a good improvement technologically. Yeah, absolutely. And I would even go further and say that people should be saying Ryzen 9000 gaming on Windows, because in a lot of other in Linux, it all performs perfectly already, it seems. And in some applications on Windows, not gaming, it performs well, although it does seem to perform worse in non-gaming applications on Windows too. But having said that, I will also say, me and you were on record, Dan, before Ryzen 9000 came out, saying that Strix seemed like it needed some updates too.
Oh yeah,
not as many, and it apparently is running some of the right software, but I still think it could use a little bit of a boost.
Yeah, and I don't think Strix was a disappointment per se,
No.
but looking at some of the nuances of it, it is a strange chip.
Yeah.
Where it's like the 365 is almost better than the 370 in a lot of contexts. Which is
if you're at high performance or very low, but if you're at 15 to 20 watts, it's way weaker. And meanwhile, if you give a ton of it's bandwidth starved for the graphics card, but power starved for the 12-core CPU. It's a bit odd.
Yeah, and I would say though, back to Jensen's question, with the new branding for their laptop chips, maybe they are starting to differentiate the branding a little bit with the AI different naming things. I mean, it still has Ryzen in the name, I suppose, but I think they are trying to differentiate them to some extent, because they've kind of just they've had very similar naming schemes to their desktop parts for a while.
AI Meable Chief writes in and says, are we witnessing a blueprint in the making where AMD's long-lived desktop sockets focus on either gaming or compute before converging in a final iteration? Or is AMD just flexing its opportunistic muscle with Zen 5? No. Look, people inside AMD said Zen 5 is going to be a solid gaming uplift. You can choose, to say that I'm making that up, but I'm telling you, there's something with the CCD to CCD latency that was not supposed to be there. Full stop. These are the same people that got me the only channel on YouTube to get the correct Zen 5 IPC. And again, this channel exclusively like Strix Halo, Kraken. I mean, Hawkpoint. How many things do I need to go through for you to believe me? Like, no, I'm not making this up. People at AMD expected more out of the gaming performance. When it comes to compute or server performance, Zen 4 and Zen 2 focused on data center just as much as Zen 5. Data center is always front and center. Yeah, so I've seen these weird conspiracy theories that they didn't want the gaming performance to be good, and it's like, shut up. Yes, the only one I can think of that did, I think, focus more on client was Zen 3. That one did. Like
Yeah,
you could tell, but everything else, no. Data center has always been first, and what we're seeing in Zen 5's gaming performance is a result of some mistakes or failures. And I'm not going to go into it. I don't know if this will ever make it into a leak, but I'm hearing from people who are working on Epic right now, and they are running into issues there in some apps that they did not expect to be there. So no, Zen 5 has just had a problematic launch for everyone.
and I do think once like X3D is out and the software issues are ironed out, there's still a very good chance that like the 9800 X3D will be have the performance crown like the 7800 X3D does right now.
Well, I think it's worth pointing out too. I don't know if with Windows updates or microcode they'll be able to do anything with this weird CCD to CCD latency issue we're seeing with Zen 5. I wouldn't bet on it either way, but what I will say is that the 9800 X3D won't have that issue. So there's that right there. There's also evidence that Zen 5 could really use more bandwidth, and you'll get some of that in some scenario. Well, you will get more bandwidth, with Vcache. It just depends on which app can actually fit within it, or I don't want to get into that, but that should help in that department as well. And also Zen 5 X3D is clocked higher than Zen 4 X3D, unlike before. So if you think about it that way, then there's like even a 5% gaming IPC uplift with Zen 5. Hopefully they'll fix it to get closer to 10%. Also, it'll be clocked like 5% faster than Zen 4 X3D. Boom, at least a 10% performance uplift over the 7800 X3D. Mm-hmm. I believe 20% or more. So especially as it ages, I think the new architecture is going to need time to age, and it'll age just like Zen 4 X3D did, where you're seeing 30% uplifts 2 years after it came out versus the predecessor. I'm still pretty confident we're going to see that with 9800 X3D. But speaking of X3D, let us move on to story number 2. All Jessie wants is for Maurice to play with her more often, but unfortunately he just does not give out playtime or kisses for as low of a rate as she does. And I think she's just going to have to deal with that. But do you know what you don't have to deal with? Paying too much for Microsoft software if you go to CDkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by CDkeyoffer.com and their back to school sale. Whether it's Microsoft operating systems, Office products, or even many of the latest games, CDkeyoffer.com provides PC gamers with a product this community deserves. Amongst endlessly elevating component costs, fair pricing on Microsoft keys is one thing that we at least should get, I think. And the Moore's Law is Dead team has been working with CDkeyoffer.com for a very long time. And that's because they're good to me, good to Dan, good to about a dozen family members of friends of mine that have used their services. And they've been really, really good, most importantly, to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So support this channel by using offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off Microsoft software, or you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website like games. Using either of those codes really helps the channel a ton, and it helps save you money. So use those codes BrokenSilicon and Die Shrink at CDkeyoffer.com today. Ryzen 5 7600 X3D leak, which I'll get to in a second, everybody, and Ryzen 9000 X3D delay rumors. So quoting her first here from Tech Power Up and then moving to my own editorialization, AMD's upcoming Ryzen 9000 X3D series of processors with 3D Vcache have been reportedly scheduled to arrive in January 2025, according to numerous rumors emerging on Twitter, which would point to a reveal at CES. While disappointing for eager enthusiasts, the delay could signify that AMD is taking extra precautions to ensure a smooth launch and deliver a product that meets the high-performance standards set by its previous 3D Vcache offerings. Maybe AMD has realized that they can't screw this one up too. Meanwhile, Huang Angfu, hope I said that right, on Twitter also suggested that the 7600 X3D would be launching in September. Now, I cannot personally confirm if Ryzen 9000 X3D is delayed, but what I can confirm from my own sources is that the 7600 X3D is launching in September, very soon actually, less than a month from now, and much more from one of my sources too, which also confirmed, if I put I'll have Jar put this quote on screen, I'll just quote the person. This person who's a distributor said that they can confirm that the R5 7600 X3D is targeting a launch in the first half of September. It has a 65-watt TDP and currently plans to have an MSRP of $249. Now, that MSRP isn't final. I was directly told that. But at a minimum, this person then would suggest that they're likely going to price this thing below 300, maybe 299 or lower. And it seems like the majority of the volume is not going to do it yourself at first. The 7600 XTD seems like it's targeting OEM and system integrators hard, which makes some sense to me. But anyways, the fact that I can confirm that the 7600 XTD is launching next month, a month where we previously heard Zen 5 XTD was going to launch, that does to me suggest that that could mean this is a filler product because Zen 5 XTD has been delayed. So there we go. I'm not sure, but I think it could suggest that.
I mean, the 7600 X3D, cool. Glad they're bringing that to X3D to the 6-core models. I do always worry with AMD now at this point. They really are super crowded at the like $200 to $300 MSRP point. And I'm worried that their products at this point are confusing and hard to market because I really don't know to tell you if like where I would want to put the 7600 X3D at. But
well, I forgot to mention this. I'll have Jar put a leak slide up for this as well. I've heard that they're going to discontinue the 5800 X3D soon.
Oh, so I mean, if they discontinue that, if they discontinue the 5800 X3D, I mean, just looking at benchmarks, this would easily beat that in gaming. Yeah, I mean, if this is just a replacement for the 5800 X3D,
this is them embracing AM5 fully now.
Yeah, that's great to me, and this is great. Sounds like a great CPU to fill a gap that they no longer have. So, I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, I hope this comes to DIY and doesn't just remain an OEM product. But I don't know. They always have all of these weird products, and a lot of them are mostly OEM.
But yeah, I got to say that this to me, again, I hope this isn't true, but why would they launch a 7600 X3D if Zen 5 X3D is launching even within a month or two of that, when Zen 5 X3D probably doesn't even cost more to make? I think
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
I think they had plans with OEMs where they were like, you're going to get this great product. It'll be out before RDNA 4, which we'll get to in a second. You can bundle it with the 8800 XT. And then they said, we have to delay it a quarter. And OEMs were like, what? And they went, well, don't worry. We'll give you the 7600 X3 for even less money. And they were like, okay, that's really, I think that's probably what's going on here.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because I don't know like what their plans are with the 9600 X3D and like if they're planning on doing all of their X3D products closer to each other than they typically have in the past because the 7600 X3D would look very stupid launching next to all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had this confirmed by anyone I've talked to individually. I mean, specifically the people I talk to, but the rumors are that there is still a 9950 X3D and I don't know why 9900 X3D
because they want a product that doesn't sell
and a 9800 X3D. I have not heard any rumors of a 9600 X3D, although I continue to think a way to win everyone back is don't hold that back. Launch it right away. Launch a $300 6-core. You'll bury Arrow Lake sales with that thing. And that will be kind of like, people will remember Zen 5. Oh, it had a bad launch, but when the 96 and 9800 X3D launched at the same time, we didn't really care anymore. But I would suggest, too, this means they might not have a 9600 X3D for a while.
Yeah, because to me, the best thing AMD could do, and I know, like how you said in your last video, you're not saying this will happen, is just a full relaunch before Arrow Lake, or not full relaunch, but like a soft relaunch where X3D is just takes front and center in their marketing and like 3 months, but I guess that's not happening. So
we don't know for sure, but simplest explanation, I think, for all of this happening at the same time is that.
Yeah, they definitely are giving Intel the chance at a layup with Arrow Lake.
Which is huge. Pretty writes in, if Zen 5 may have to wait to be fixed, could Arrow Lake potentially end up with an advantage of really launching earlier in a finished state? Yeah, but I think the real question is if Zen 5 X3D is out before Arrow Lake, because I can't state this enough. I don't think anyone will care about anything but the 9800 X3D once that is out. Yeah. I think the 9600 X3D is an attempt to have a filler product where I still would suggest Arrow Lake's probably only going to be 10 to 15% faster in gaming than the 7600 X3D. And if it costs 3 times as much for that i9, I still think AMD is going to probably take most of the market share, but there's no doubt that it just seems obvious AMD is leaving a huge opening here for Intel that I think they had a chance to close the door on them. They probably still will because of all the issues with Raptor Lake, to be entirely honest. I've said before, I think AMD could not launch Zen 5. They'd take market share from Intel this year. Do it yourself. But I think that there's a chance it's not as damning of a market share take as it would have been were they to have nailed the Zen 5 and X3 launches at the right time.
Well, yeah, that is AMD's big advantage against Intel. Even if Intel does manage to take the performance crown with Arrow Lake with a $700 or $750 CPU or whatever it will be, AMD has really lucked out with their architecture being having the best gaming performance CPU be their mid-range one.
Which is who would actually want the best gaming CPU. People who want to spend $300-$400, not $700 and get a, get an entire river to cool their PC.
Yeah, and especially in the current market where CPU performance is sometimes a bit overstated, where we kind of have saturated gaming performance with CPUs in a lot of ways at anything above $300.
Root Knight writes in, do you believe that we are in the phase where CPUs have outgrown games CPU requirements? Yes.
Yeah, and I've talked about this on prior podcasts. I don't know exactly how you would do it or what tests I would want to see, but I think a lot of qualitative stuff is missed in gaming benchmarks, which obviously they're only showing you objective data. Of course, they're missing the qualitative facts, but I don't know. Just upgrading from my 2700X to my 5900X, even though some games had huge performance uplifts, but some games were relatively modest. But the overall package I had was just so much smoother than what I had with the 2700X. And I don't think a lot of websites try to describe like the difference of user experience that you get when you get a new, better CPU.
Right. Like I'm using a Zen 4. By the way, everybody, my desktop is supposedly fixed and will arrive within a week. So it's coming, and then I'll be back to using my 4090. And Zen 3 instead of Zen 4. But yeah, this temporary desktop I'm using, which Minis Forum sent me with the 7945HX that runs at like 140 watts. So it's a 7950X. I mean, with like 3% less performance. The things that stuck out to me is playing games. I mean, look, it's better. It is noticeable, actually. It's that it is a lot faster than Zen 3 in games. But most games, you don't see it. But the snappiness and like editing and application performance, I was like, whoa, like this thing is so much faster. And you can look at some benchmarks of Zen 5 and applications, especially multi-threading, and it'll 50% uplift. So I agree, Dan. I think people are overstating how much we need these CPUs for gaming performance and understating that, like, if you go from Zen 2 to Zen 5, I mean, it's going to feel light years faster. Like, and yet half of your games will still be running at the same frame rate. All right, let us move on then to story number 3. Intel Arrow Lake S lineup and clock speeds allegedly revealed. Quoting here from Tech Power Up. According to Jakin on Twitter, Intel's preparing at least 12 Core Ultra 200 series Arrow Lake S processors for the consumer segment this fall, with more variants possible for the commercial desktop segment in the future. Let me see here. And so one of them, the 285K, maxes out Arrow Lake S B0 Silicon, enabling all 8 Lion Cove P cores and all 16 Skymont E cores. It comes with a P core base frequency of 3.7 gigahertz, a 3.2 gigahertz E core base frequency, and a maximum P core boost frequency of up to 5.7 gigahertz. Then the iGPU has 64 execution units running at around 2 gigahertz. So that's half the execution units that are in Meteor Lake. Then there's the Core Ultra 7 265K that is supposed to succeed the i7 14700K. And it seems that these are still getting the 8P plus 12 E-core configuration with P-core max boost clocks of 5.5 gigahertz and then E-core max boost clocks of 4.6 gigahertz. Then there's the i5, which again, like they've been doing for a couple gens now, 6 P-cores, 8 E-cores, and let me see here, the max frequency, the P-cores, the base frequency 4.2, E-cores 3.6, and let me see, there's no Turbo Boost Max, but it boosts 2 of them up to 5.2 gigahertz. So yeah, so that means the i5 is getting significantly lower clocked yields, allegedly. Meanwhile, I will say that why I thought, there's tons of these little rumors. Oh, it's going to be at this speed, that speed. We saw that before Meteor Lake's launch. I have personally been told by a source that the i9, or I guess Core Ultra 9, will boost to 5.7 gigahertz. So I think this is probably legit. And I've also been told that I've seen the rumors that Arrow Lake S is on track to at least paper launch in October. And I was told as well that it'd be very surprising at this stage if it was delayed to November. So at least expect a paper launch in October with Arrow Lake. But do remember, that's just for the K models. I don't know if that will be in any reasonable volume. Overwhelming majority of supply of Arrow Lake isn't coming till Q1. But yeah, so what do you think about this, Dan?
I mean, it sounds to me like they're not. Of course, who knows if there will be like another stepping because of how many freaking different boost clocks they advertise. Jesus, just looking at Raptor, like they advertise like 4 different types of boost clocks at this point. But I mean, if it maxes out at 5.7 gigahertz, that means that they're not just going for broke on frequency like they have been in the past, which I think is a good sign. But I mean, that's the biggest thing I see out of this. Everything, to me, looks like they're not trying to go for any new big claim that they can make with this generation, which sounds like they're taking their foot off the gas to me.
Yeah, so okay, I'm just looking at the max clocks for the i5 14600K. Yeah, so 2% faster. So yeah, I think that's some of this is worth pointing out here, though, when we look at the performance expectations. I think it is worth pointing out that I think Arrow Lake has a big opening here, but if you really read between the lines on the boost clocks, we have a 5.2 gigahertz i5. All right, well, this is the product that's probably going to be $350 to $400, right? And for those that say it can't be 400, yeah, look, I think it's probably 350. But remember, they're using 3 nanometers, so this costs a lot more to make than Raptor Lake did, people. So I don't know. We'll see about that. What they'll be able to even charge when their margins are already in the dumps as it is with a less expensive node. But then if it's competing with the 9800X3D, which I believe is supposed to have, from what I've heard, at least a 5.2 gigahertz clock speed, maybe 5.3, 5.4. Well, okay, let's say Arrow Lake has a 10% IPC advantage over Zen 5, which I think is plausible, but it's clocked 3% lower and doesn't have Vcache. I still see 9800X3D at least trading blows with Arrow Lake and gaming, if not winning everybody. And it's going to be probably in the 400, 450 region and use less energy because it has Vcache. And if you go to the i9, that one might win just about everything, but I think that's going to be $700 and it has the same clock speed as Zen 5. So you're probably looking at a flat, like 10% win there with that model. But 9800X3 will definitely probably still be competitive with that and also beat the i5. So I don't know. I do think people really need to read into the details on this one, that the top i9, it's clocked lower than Raptor Lake refresh, but more so the i5 is clocked at only 5.2 gigahertz, which is it's lower than the 9700X as well. So that's a weakness there.
It is. I mean, it's potentially a weakness, but I mean, they do need to clock their CPUs lower than what they've been clocking them at, or at least not going for those huge increases like they happen every time. And I mean, the i5 isn't going to be likely going to be the competitor to the 9800X3D.
That's true. It could be the i7.
Or the Ultra 7.
Yeah, sorry.
But I think what you really need to look at is the 14700K, because that will probably be a little more expensive than the 9800X3D, or I would think around the same pricing. So if they can manage to beat the 9800X3D or trade blows with the 9800X3D with their i7, then I think Arrow Lake has a pretty good generation. If
I bet it trades blows, but I think over time it's not going to win.
But if it's at the end of the day, the i9 that is really the one that's trading blows with the 9800X3D, then I think
it's using more energy. No one wants to spend $700 just for the best gaming performance.
Yeah, to me, it's a worse Alder Lake, where it's like, I mean, I guess you guys got some of your issues in check, but you're still not a more convincing buy than what AMD has to offer.
You mean in that this is kind of like Arrow Lake versus Zen 5 is like Alder Lake versus Zen 3.
Yeah, except for Zen 3, with Alder Lake, there was they had finally caught up, and in some cases it was a better option to buy than AMD. And here it's like, it's good job you guys caught up again, but you're still kind of worse in a lot of ways and
more expensive.
Yeah, you still have deficiencies that make AMD a more convincing buy a lot of the time. But yeah, all I can hope is that they execute again on whatever comes next. I can't even remember at this point. Nova Lake or
Arrow Lake? No, it's Arrow Lake
Arrow Lake
refresh,
Refresh. That's right.
which I don't actually expect to be very much better.
Well, that's what we've come to know and love with their refresh architectures. So.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess when I look at this, I thought it was worth talking about this time again, because I can confirm that at least I've been told that should be the clock speeds of the Ultra 9, that I've been told that this thing should be launching in October. And I just think it's interesting to see that, at least on paper, it seems like Intel may pull off Arrow Lake being pretty good. Good enough to take back market share? Well, I'm skeptical with the 9800X 3D. That's probably going to tie them, if not win gaming performance, at half the price of the Ultra 9 anyways. But good enough that AMD isn't blowing them out of the water this year, at least in performance. In sales, volume, I don't know. But you'd agree there, right? There's an opening here where Arrow Lake is not. We'll have to see how it pans out. It looks like Intel is an opening here to be a real viable option.
Well, yeah, the way I would put it is AMD has done a soft blow to their reputation this year with Zen 5, but it's not enough of a blow for Intel to come back with a not completely disappointing architecture and take the crown again.
All right. Let us move on then to story number 4. RX 7800M 12 gigabyte finally breaks cover, because we've had the 7900 and 7600 just forever here. Quoting from TechSpot, one Netbook's newly unveiled second generation external GPU is the first known product to feature AMD's RX 7800M mobile GPU. Internal benchmarks suggest that the chip could put high-end gaming performance within reach of connected handheld gaming PCs, low-end laptops, and in mini PCs. According to the specs for the 1X GPU, the 7800M nearly doubles the number of compute units from the 1X GPU 1 from 32 to 60, so full Navi 32, and increases GDDR6 video memory from 8 to 12 gigabytes, so not every MCD is enabled. One Netbook's video shows the high-end mobile GPU running the Black Myth Wukong benchmark comfortably with 60 frames per second at 3440 by 1440 resolution, so 21 by 9, 1440p.
Oh, that's right.
Using high graphic settings will connect it to the company's 1X Player X1 mini PC. Meanwhile, I will also say that, I think this is coming to notebooks because RDNA 4 will not be ready for notebooks until early next year, and that this is kind of AMD getting rid of Navi 32.
Well, depending on what they can sell Navi 32 out after Navi 48 and 44 come out, they're going to need to clear that $500 chip channel, because I don't think if the pricing on all of that is accurate, it is where it lands. And
for RDNA 4,
the 7800 XT and going to very quickly look like a stupid GPU.
Unless it's like 450 or less,
Yeah.
And I think when you see smaller companies get access to products like this, especially when they're first coming out, that's because there's availability. This is something we've talked before. Like, people are like, when is Strix coming to handhelds? And I think there's rumor it might come to one in October. It's like, guys, the first handhelds, the first things you could buy with Hawkpoint was a minis form tablet. And I think the GPD wins something. That's because OEMs have bought up Phoenix, were preparing for Strix, and weren't placing as many orders for Hawkpoint. They wanted Hawkpoint. They just didn't want it the first month because they had to get rid of Phoenix first. What you're seeing here is a small company getting the 7800M first. That means AMD's dumping this thing. That's what I would say this directly suggests. But I thought it was worth talking about. It seems interesting. I think, of course, it will all come down to price. I certainly wouldn't complain if $1,500 or $1,200 Strix laptops, or even Hawkpoint laptops for $1,000 started getting paired with this. I think it'd be a great budget mid-range gaming PC, even high-end, arguably, for a laptop. So I think it's worth talking about, though.
Yeah, or as the article mentions, I'm sure some minis form mini PC would be great for this. This would be great for something from them.
Yeah. Crystal Joe writes in and says, "Hi, Tom and Dan. I'm a longtime listener, and this is my first time writing in. Well, welcome. I have an ROG Ally at the moment and really like it, but the performance for newer games is a bit lackluster. Do you have some information about Strix Halo handhelds? Will there be any handhelds with Strix Halo or a variant? In which time frame will they potentially be released? I would also love to hear your general thoughts on the kind of hardware combinations that it would become." So, I think we get asked this every other episode. What's going on with handhelds with Strix Halo? And happy to just say it again. So Strix Halo launches early next year next to Kraken. As for performance, there's something that I've seen on documentation called Halo Low Power. Seems to me this may be a Strix Halo variant where they're trying to cut it down to fit into like a Strix package or socket, because it said only 128-bit and only 20 compute units. It's an old document. Maybe they'll make it 24. That means cutting the thing in half, basically. The only reason they would do that, though, I think, is to fit it into smaller devices. And so I would be surprised if there isn't at least one handheld with Strix Halo Low Power. Having said that, I think the overwhelming majority are going to be Strix and Kraken. Like, there's no way around that. And but when it comes to performance, even if it is 20 compute units, although I suspect that actually go to 24 or 28, I know that would have at least 16 megabytes of infinity cache enabled. So at 20 compute units, even you're looking at, what is that, like 25% more compute units, I think, than 16. Plus infinity cache, the same amount of infinity cache on a 6500 XT, and this generation of infinity cache is much faster than what they were putting in RDNA 2 per megabyte. So because of that, because Strix is clearly bandwidth starved, I think that infinity cache alone would boost performance by 20, 30%. And with the extra compute units, I could see 30 to 50% more performance than what we're seeing with Strix. Which, what would that place that at? Basically, like, you're looking at like kind of 2060, almost 3060 performance. Probably 2060, 3060 laptop performance. But yeah, you could see that in a handheld if they gave it 30 watts of power. So that's what you're looking for. I think generally speaking to be more like a 2060, but that's still really good if they can get that into a handheld. But again, I think that's going to be a niche or really expensive handheld. Overwhelming majority, I think, are going to be Strix or Kraken.
Yeah, I do think that there's a problem just with, well, not a problem with Strix Halo, but I think the products that Strix Halo are going to go into are not mostly for gamers at this point. And like, I do think Strix Point is better for handhelds in general, because I don't know, even if you put a low power Strix Halo in there and it's way stronger than Strix, if it's using 30 watts like you suggest, that's too much for a handheld.
Well, I think, no, most of those handhelds use 25 watts. It's 15 to 25.
Off the wall, or you mean?
No, in handheld mode. So okay. Believe it or not, that's what the ROG Ally's pulling, baby.
Well, the ROG Ally didn't get great reviews for that reason, though, I think, because its battery life wasn't that great.
No, but I'm saying so does the Steam Deck, Dan.
Okay, well.
So its battery life was bad. I'm just going to say it. Because it runs Windows. That is why the ROG Ally's battery life is bad, is because it's running Windows. And were you to have some infinity cache in there, that would help with battery life as well. So I think there's no way around. The wider you go, the better performance you get as well in that power consumption band. That's why the AI 370, AI9 370, or AI9 HX 370, whatever the heck. That's why the 370 beats the 365 at 17 watts more than it beats it at 30 watts, Dan, is because it's more compute units clocked lower. So I actually think a Strix Halo product would probably have the most advantage at 15 watts over Strix. So the problem is I think this is going to be expensive and not coming out for like 6 months. So I don't know why. And I just think you're going to see, like, HP wanting to put this in a $1,800 Spectre laptop before they're going to want Asus to put this in an $800 handheld.
I guess we'll see what the performance looks like when it comes out, but based on what companies are putting in like $1,300 laptops, I could totally see even low power going into like you said, $1,800 or like $2,000 laptops. Or
even just a $1,500 extra thin one that's kind of like a Strix, but better. They're going to get more money out of that than putting that in a handheld. Unless someone here is about to raise their hand.
Unless someone wants to make a $2,000 handheld.
People in the comments, let us know. Would you buy a $2,000 handheld? Maybe you would. I don't think most people would, though.
Well, and that becomes the next discussion. Is it's just handhelds are already a relatively niche product, and a niche product I just don't think is going to get made.
I think what you're going to see with handhelds is there's going to be a lot of, like, I don't know if there will be some, Z2 extreme variant of this, but I think it seems pretty obvious that if your handheld is going to target 10 watts, you should be min-maxing the 365. And that's the one that they probably will be able to give away for cheap, or a special cheaper bin that runs at lower clocks. So again, they're going to sell it for less, of the 370 for a 25-watt handheld. I think that's what you're going to see them selling and putting into like $600 handhelds, $800, $1,000 handhelds. And then you're going to see variants of Kraken with just 8 compute units, but will still probably perform like Hawkpoint going into those $500 handhelds. Because I don't know, again, Strix Halo, even if it just uses one CCD, I think what we're looking at like 300 millimeters squared of like, and it's really like 3 nanometer and 4 nanometer. That's not, it's going to be cheap. But I mean, technically, if you were to ask me what the best gaming handheld would be, it would be Strix Halo, low power with Vcache on it. I mean, look, if you had $2,000 to spend on a handheld, yeah, that would crush everything in efficiency. But speaking of crushing in efficiency, let us move on to story number 5. RX 8800 XT leaked to launch Q4 with 8103 class performance. Last Wednesday, yours truly got the drop on basically everything you need to know about AMD's RDNA 4 flagship, which is launching sooner than many expected. And I'm just going to pull up the leak that I put out last week and go through it really quickly here. So I focused on Navi 48. It has 64 compute units, finally able to confirm that, running at 2.9 to 3.2 gigahertz. It's a little bit lower than the range I gave before, but that's because I'm hearing pretty firmly this thing's going to be clocked between 210 and 280 watts. Specifically, AMD is telling partners that they want you to be able to use the same power supply as the 7700 XT. That means 250 watts or less to me, most likely. And if they're not pushing it 300 watts, I don't think it's going to run at 3.3 gigahertz, really. I'm also told that it's 96 megabytes of infinity cache or less. Can't really go into the details on that one. I can only tell you that I'm directly told it is an increase in infinity cache over RDNA 3. And then it has a 256-bit bus, 20 gigabit per second of GDR6, 16 gigabytes of that. Increased amount of ray tracing accelerators per CU. Of course, it's on 4 nanometer. The FP8 and Matrix hardware that we saw in the PS5 Pro leak that I had. And it's supposed to cost between $499 and $399. Now, here's where things get pretty crazy here. I'm told rasterization performance is expected to at least trade blows with the RTX 4080. Which would place it single digits weaker than the 7900 XTX. The 7900 XT actually gets pretty close to the 4080 in rasterization. So again, around 7900 XT, 4080 raster. But crazily enough, I'm told that the ray tracing performance is expected to trade blows with the 4070 Ti Super, and AMD optimized titles get close to the 4080. And then that also, it will have high volume in Q4, also focusing on system integrators. Again, I think AMD's launching that 7600X 3D because they want that bundled with RDNA 4, in pre-built PCs. And also, there is a reference cooler. I'm told AMD's done selling these things from AMD.com. Small tidbit worth pointing out. They said
That's unfortunate.
Well, they said they only did that because MSRP was an issue, and it's just not anymore. And they said if this sells well, they don't have the customer support for service, millions of people calling them about this. So that's what all of that is about. And so there you go. Well, AMD's 8800 XT doesn't seem like it will beat the upper expectations leaked by this channel months ago. It does seem to be expected to deliver at least in the upper half of expectations when it comes to raster. And I'd say, tell me what you think, and peak expectations when it comes to ray tracing performance. And if this launches at $499 in high volume next to the 7600X 3D, or I guess a month or two later, at least in time for the holiday season, though, this writer thinks that such a bundle could sell like hotcakes, devoid of really any direct competition in those pricing classes for half a year.
I mean, yeah, to me, this is kind of exactly what people have wanted in the market, something that actually shakes up price performance relatively. Because for the past couple generations, there really just hasn't been that huge of a reduction in price performance overall. And I don't think people really want, or I don't think that many people really want a 5090. I think people want a 4080 for $500. And if they can deliver on that, I think RDNA 4 will be super well received, even if it's a regression in performance. I don't think that many people even care that much about 7900 XTX, or 7900 XT performance even. So if Navi 48 can do this, if there's some Navi 44 card for like 300 or 350, I don't know, pricing could be back to a semi-reasonable place, or this would at least rejigger pricing a lot.
Yeah, I'd also say just directly here that this surprised me. I mean, obviously, I've been one of the few channels that hasn't completely jumped on the bandwagon of RDNA 4 won't be ready till next year. All I would say is technically I can only promise you it will be ready in quarter 1. But everyone I talk to inside AMD, especially working on the software, says, dude, this thing's ready. So they can do whatever they want, but it's ready. And when I was told this by one of my best sources, I actually had the person call me because I was like, or I called them, I guess you'd say, and there was a long conversation about this because I'm like, are you 100% sure? Because this is something other people are hearing the opposite of. And the person said this was an intentional misdirection by AMD, telling AIBs that it won't be ready until quarter 1, and that, this entire time they've been giving them plenty of time to make the coolers so that because it's not a rush launch, it should be cheaper. So yeah, this was an intentional misdirection by AMD, and they're going out of their way to keep pricing and the costs under control. So that I just think it's really exciting.
Well, yeah, I on this with our previous story. Well, yeah, previous story about the 7800M. Like, yeah, them trying to clear the channel of Navi 32. This is completely consistent with that.
Exactly. And we reported right like a month ago that I was being told RDNA 3 productions ended. I'm like, that tells me in under 6 months they're launching this thing.
Yeah, and if they can launch something that is at least in between the 7900 XT and XTX, then I don't think that
with much better ray tracing. So
I don't think
on average it's better probably.
I don't think people will be disappointed to see that at $500. I mean, that just sounds like, so things got 30% better price performance overnight. Great.
Yeah, and I mean, I also think something that has to be pointed out, like if this is really pulled off here, I don't know the exact die size, but by all accounts, it's smaller than the 4080. So if this thing uses like 250 watts instead of like, it's not three, let's be honest, the 4080 really uses about 300 watts. Mm-hmm. But if this is 250 watts versus 300 watts and also has a smaller die size than the 4080 and doesn't even use GDDR6X, what an engineering achievement. I mean, this tells you, Radeon's got something here.
Oh, yeah. Just from a technological standpoint, it sounds like it's punching above its weight class. So I'm excited to see what RDNA 5 or future iterations where they go for the performance crown look like. Because I'm hoping RDNA 4 is just one generation where they're like, all right, we'll only do mid-range, and then they'll try to go for performance again.
Now that it's warming up outside, Jessie couldn't be happier to be jumping around every day in the warmer weather. And it's good for me too. Running around with her, teaching her tricks, that's good for my health as well, not just hers. But all of this gallivanting, well, it takes up time and it pressures me to make my lunches quicker to get moving faster with Jessie every weekend afternoon. And usually quick means less healthy. Well, unless you know about Vite Ramen. This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Vite Ramen is a healthy, tasty, and shelf-stable food crafted by an American startup that offers a ton of options for eating healthy, like their classic packages that make it easy to add protein and other ingredients of your choice, and then also their Ramen Go packages that offer a healthy microwavable option for those who truly only have a 15-minute lunch break away from home. And I do need to take a second also to remind everyone that they don't just make ramen. They also have Nano Boost Vitality Powder that I honestly think blows away the health powder competition. I literally drink this any night a broken silicon is recorded extra late instead of coffee. And they also have a collection of silverware and accessories that are always high quality. Like the Goofy Girl DM Nakiri knife, I tried it out. It is insanely sharp. It is probably the nicest knife this household owns. So not just the ramen, although the ramen's great. Everything else on there is high quality, and that's why I've been working with Vite Ramen for so long. I actually like their products, all of their products, a lot. I've never tried something they made that wasn't good, so check them out. And remember that even just clicking on the link in the description helps the channel a ton, and buying some of the special packs through that link helps you save money and support the channel even more. So support Moore's Law Z by checking out Vite Ramen today. Yeah, well, and I have to point this out. Like, let's think about this. I saw a lot of comments that said, we must now all thank Sony for making AMD make ray tracing good for the PS5 Pro. And I honestly think there's a grain of truth to that. I mean, you have, GCN1, crazy efficient, great price performance. Polaris, efficient, great price performance. And then now, RDNA 2, crazy efficient, good price performance. RDNA 4, crazy efficient, allegedly, great price performance. Almost feels like the RDNA generation you should get is the one that lines up with a console release.
Yeah, that's not a bad point.
I mean, honest to God, that's what it kind of seems like to me. And it seems like, that AMD targeted what Sony wanted. What Sony wants is probably thought out well to be cheap and mass producible. So, I also say that an interesting point we brought up on a die shrink, I think a month ago, there was a reader mail that was put in that said, you guys keep talking about how less is more when it comes to software support. Like the less you make, the more people you have working on fewer products to have proven software. Do you think there's a chance that like AMD really just should stop biting off more than they can chew? Because if RDNA 4 is this good and launches with a great new version of FSR and works really well, I think this tells you like maybe people complaining about like, oh, there should be all of these complicated dies and we want 100 of them. It's like, I don't know, like when AMD just has a couple dies for RDNA 1 or Polaris or this, it seems to just work. And this tells you maybe they should just do kind of a leapfrogging thing that they did before, where I know people called them rebranding for a while, but there's a reason GCN worked well, and then GCN 2.0 worked really well, and then they rebranded GCN 1 below it. I'm just saying.
No, I see what you're saying. Like, yeah, it clearly AMD overworking itself is a waste of time to an extent because they're competing with substantially larger companies. So like that's why Zen early on worked so well, and maybe Radeon or AMD in general isn't ready to be at the point where they have this die that's I don't remember how many chips the whatever
7
that was originally called 7. Yeah, so maybe they're not ready for 7 chiplet design heterogeneous designs yet. And I don't know. Yeah, going back to the drawing board and just going monolithic when your chiplet-based design seems to be way too expensive is a good idea.
Well, and it wasn't just 7 chiplets in the 7900 XTX. You also had one configuration here for 31, one for 32, one for 33.
Mm-hmm.
So you're launching 3 different products here, each one with multiple chiplets. Here it's just 2. You're done. We just have to make the drivers for basically 2 chips.
Yeah, it's a lot simpler. And also, I was trying to reference I don't know what the code name for this die is. The now canceled like Navi 41.
Oh, you're trying to reference Navi 4C.
That was like, yeah, whatever that was.
Oh,
like,
that was like at least 13. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Maybe they're not ready to produce that many dies and have that complicated of a heterogeneous architecture.
Mm-hmm. QH Freddy writes in and says, how much of AMD not wanting to delay RDNA 4 to 2025 could be motivated by wanting to get a strong launch and quickly to get away from the clown fiesta of Zen 5? 0. I think, don't get me wrong, they're probably aware that this should go well to win gamers back a bit. But at the same time, from what I'm told, this was the plan the whole time. So, no, I don't think that they're like, and I think people way, and this is something I've heard sources tell me a lot, overstate how reactionary these companies are. Like you think, oh, they did this because of this, and oh, they did that because of that. No, all of this stuff was planned 3 years ahead of time, and it just so happened to be this was going on at the same time, then.
Well, yeah, I just can't imagine a company their size would be able to redirect that quickly. And I also don't know how much AMD's the two sides of AMD, like Radeon and Zen, like how much there's actually intercommunication between them or how much they function as their own companies.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. Whatever Radeon's doing, there's a certain degree where it's like, well, we need to make sure this is ready for Sony by this time, and we need to make sure this architecture is defined for Rembrandt by this time to have RDNA 2 in the APU. But at the same time, no, they're not like, we better make sure RDNA 4 is ready perfectly for this or that. I mean, obviously, if they see something lining up, though, they'll go, ooh, we might want to make sure RDNA 4 is ready around Strix, which they kind of seem to be. But it's not like they knew it would be ahead of time, I don't think.
Well, yeah, and I suppose though their graphics and CPUs need to keep a roughly equal pace in some ways, so they can package them together in their APUs, like with the PS5.
Yeah. Well, anyways, speaking of the PS5, let us move on to story number 6, which is a fun little leak coming out of this channel here. All right. PlayStation 5 Pro power leak. So I don't have a graphic to put on screen here. So just listen up. This one will be brief. Recently, in a meeting with a source I had, I was shown a PS5 Pro dev kit. I saw it. I saw the dev kit, everybody. And what I'm going to tell you is it has 2 terabytes of storage. I can't promise that will translate into retail, although I do know there are rumors out there. I should say I know. I thought I saw that there were rumors out there that there's 2 terabytes of storage.
It would make sense, though, if a dev kit would just have more storage, wouldn't it, though?
It would, but it would also line up with Xbox out of nowhere launching a 2 terabyte Series X. Like maybe they know Sony's doing this. So I think there's a chance it could have 2 terabytes of storage, at least the dev kit does. And also something I noted that the person I was talking to didn't really think much of, but I think it's worth pointing out. It had the same 2-prong power connector that the PS5 had. So that suggests that this thing is using less than 250 watts and likely around or below 200 watts. They're not pushing this thing hard at all. It's probably going to be a very quiet and cool running machine, considering the transistor increase they have over the base PS5, not using any more energy. And meanwhile, I just thought I'd throw this in here as well. Outlets are reporting that the PS5 Pro was an open secret at Gamescom, like anyone you asked. Like one dev apparently I saw in an article literally said, "Oh, we're pushing back our launch, so it's next to the PS5 Pro." So
Jesus.
There you go. This thing is coming out this year for sure. And I know that it uses a reasonable amount of energy. The dev kits have 2 terabytes of storage, so I think that's kind of exciting. I don't know. What do you think of this, Dan?
I mean, the PS5 Pro, everything I hear about it, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see what I can't remember what the funny term for their upscaling was, but I'm excited to see that.
Pissa, a wicked pissa.
Oh, pissa. Yeah, that's right. Everything I see about this, I'm excited. I'm glad they're not pushing like 300 watts, and this will just be a relatively quietly running machine. I mean, my PS5 base is pretty quiet as it is. So if it runs like a PS5 and it just gets, 50% extra performance with that new upscaling and ray tracing, I'm excited to see reviews for it. I'm not convinced I'll buy it at this point, but I'm excited for reviews.
I might, though, because for me, it's just an easy thing to justify when it's not $1,000 like a graphics card. And it's like, oh, but so like half of these games, like I play Helldivers on here, is just going to run better. Why not? That's how I think of it, though. Mr. Sideburns writes in, and he says, I see that Sony have dropped the price of the PSVR 2 to $350 from $500, resulting in reported sales increase of over 2,000%. And I looked up a link. There is a report literally saying 2,000%. Have Sony decided to revitalize the VR space by dropping their margins, or are they trying to drop their inventory ahead of the PC adapter release to make some quick money? How do you think this will affect the VR market, both on PC and PlayStation? I don't know. The rumors coming out right now, not that I've really talked to people about it too much, but like the rumors coming out that I've seen in headlines is that Sony's all but abandoning PSVR for now, or at least putting it into hibernation, that they're moving it to PC so that it can have sales continue there, and they'll see if that picks up. My big takeaway is, if anyone will remember, I don't remember, is it 2 years ago we did that Meta Quest 2 bomb cost leak where I'm like, this proves that the PSVR 2 could cost way less people. It's not wireless. It doesn't have an entire PC built into it like the Quest 2 does. The screen and all of their other sensors do not make this thing cost more. This is ridiculous. And I think this just proves me right, that they always could have dropped the price, and that they should have, and if they would have, it would have sold better, that price was just too high. And if you're going to target console gamers with VR, console gamers pay $500 for a gaming device, not $2,000 like a PC gamer, and they probably want their VR device to cost half as much as well. And it's just stupid they didn't do this from the beginning, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, though. Sony seems like they're done with VR at this point, based on like stories that we've heard.
And kind of everyone does. Jumping to the wrap up here, Meta is reportedly canceling the Quest Pro 2.
I mean, it sounds like they were trying to make VR a thing for better part of a decade now, and some people were excited about it. It has some cool features, but there just isn't enough there to convince most people to buy it.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think VR is dead. I don't think they're all giving up.
No.
I think what we're seeing here is kind of a hibernation.
A hibernation, and yeah, maybe you'll only really see $300 VR devices come out for a while because everybody that will spend $1,000 on a VR device has already bought it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we already started talking about it here. Let's get into the wrap up. Let me write down a timestamp. So first thing in the wrap up is that the 4060 GDDR6 is coming out. I don't really have a whole lot to say. I mean, 4070 GDDR6 is coming out. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this thing. I mean,
excited to see how dubiously it's marketed.
Yeah, I already saw some reports that a lot of the packaging, I think, doesn't really say GDDR6. It just says 12 gigabyte or GDDR. Like they don't mention the 6 or the X or something. It's, yeah. I don't know. Honestly, I will say this, though. I doubt the performance is even 10% less than the 4070, in all honesty. I mean, if you use good GDDR6, it's like 10% less bandwidth, 20% at most. So I don't know. I'd be surprised if it was more than 10% weaker. Certainly not 15%.
Yeah, it's just...
But it should come with a price drop. Make it a $450 product. Come on.
Yeah, it's just annoying that they keep doing this, though.
Well, yeah. Techno writes in and says, with NVIDIA releasing a GDDR6 4070, could they launch a poor yield 102 super 20 gigabyte? No. I'm just going to cut you off, Techno. No offense. You saw NVIDIA launch a nerfed version of the 4070, and you think they'll launch a 20 gigabyte 4080? No. What this would suggest is they would launch a nerfed 4080.
Well, it is getting near the end of the generation, and that is when NVIDIA likes dumping all of their nerfed dubiously marketed GPUs. So maybe we will get a soft 4080 nerf at some point. Yeah. This is
when NVIDIA has their funny release season, like 3068 gigabyte. Also, B850 and 40 are delayed to 2025. News, but I don't care. I don't know who would buy that. We already have the same motherboards, basically. We already mentioned this too. The first Strix handheld is supposedly coming out in October. I'll be curious if there's any real volume in that, because I know of how much demand OEMs have for it right now. We have a
GPD. No, I was just saying GPD is not a very big company, so probably not that much.
But I'd be curious if, like, I'd be very surprised if it doesn't sell out instantly, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, I agree. Like I think there's desire for it, but GPD just isn't that big of a company. I mean, I'm sure they'll make a lot of money off of it.
Maybe, unless they only have 5,000. That's what I'm curious to see. Well, I think 5,000 might be a decent amount for them. I don't know. Actually, no, probably isn't. Anyways, another story here. Dedicated 8 pins showing up all over motherboards, with basically everyone saying, I think at Gamescom, that this is for the RTX 5000 series. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It certainly would make your case tidier.
Yeah.
And then actually, I mean, honestly here, I almost think I should just put my own timestamp or its own timestamp for this, because we've got a lot of depressing Xbox stories. Like, first one here is the Xbox Series S. I think the devs of Wukong are openly saying that they're having trouble getting it running on the Series S, and that the fact that they need to launch it on Series S and X simultaneously is why it hasn't come to Xbox yet, which is a big deal because this game is selling like hotcakes. This is a big hit, and it's a de facto PlayStation console exclusive right now.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean, a lot of discussion went around the Series S when that thing came out, that it kind of looks like it's weaker than the Xbox One X, and yeah, that's kind of what this is showing to me. Like, you can't have hardware that weak next to hardware as strong as the Series X and expect everything to be able to come to both of them.
Yeah. And that's a game that really pushes graphics. So I'm going to say it. This is not the last game. It's going to start happening where you're going to have this situation where a dev looks around and they're like, well, most gamers are on PlayStation or Switch or PC. Does our game fit on the Switch? Right now, no. When the Switch 2 comes out, maybe with low settings. And they're going to go, perfect. The Switch has 12 gigabytes, but it's going to run in 720p or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The PlayStation 5 is 16 gigabytes. Perfect. PCs have 16 gigabytes or more usually now. And then they're going to look at the Xbox Series S and go, this has 10 gigabytes. Not only is it 10 gigabytes, it's segmented memory. And not only that, it is the smaller install base of all of them. It is a waste of money for us to release this product on there. And I'll wonder if eventually Microsoft doesn't require the game to run on Series S, or at least they say you can take extra time to optimize it.
I mean, I would think the latter rather than the former, because the Series S is, I guess, what people buy.
Which is the problem then. But then if you're a dev, you're like, well, but that's the one everyone owns on Xbox. Should I even bother releasing it? And then, you have Indiana Jones. Here's another story announced for PlayStation, which I think is hilarious because that was a big fanboy football being thrown back and forth if Indiana Jones is going to come to PlayStation or not. And what did he say? There was this crazy, like similar to like Intel saying Arc will be on shelves but not out in Q2 or whatever it was. Like I think Phil Spencer said something like it will release on, like, we don't intend to do it now unless it makes sense for us. And right now it doesn't make sense for us to launch it then. And then they are now announcing Indiana Jones is coming to PlayStation. And they're like, well, yeah, we said back then it didn't make sense. It does now or something.
Yeah, I mean, everything to me spells that my Phil Spencer is kind of losing control at Microsoft, or at least losing pull.
Yeah. And there's now a 2 terabyte Xbox Series X for $600. I don't know who's going to buy this.
Yeah, I mean,
what you needed is this to be $400, and then say, "Hey, don't get the $400 PlayStation. We give you double the storage."
Yeah, that would be a convincing sell. But
what this tells me, and think about that, by the way, 500 to 600. I mean, the extra cost to that SSD is probably like $30.
Oh, I know.
Raw material, so this is them milking it. Everything I'm seeing here, their games are coming to PlayStation. Why? They need the money, and a 2 terabyte Xbox with a $100 price increase. They need the money. It's kind of just about milking their existing fans. It's not about expanding the tent at all.
Yeah.
Compressed AI Blocks writes in. He says, Microsoft's new Game Pass standard tier won't be getting newer content right away. According to them, this ultimately acts as a price reset and increase. What are your thoughts on this? I think it's going to be a messy backtrack considering all tiers had this ability previously, but this is how it should have been since the beginning to not devalue their own IPs. I don't know if they are going to backtrack, because when I look at them launching a $600 Xbox, I think this is milking. I don't think there's backtracking. I think they're saying, get on board, nerds, or get out. And would you agree? I don't think they're going to backtrack on basically making Xbox, the bottom tier of Xbox, Game Pass useless. I think they're done.
I think they're doing whatever they can to keep Xbox as a brand afloat at this point. So,
yeah, it's like month-to-month bills. It's not like yearly expenses.
Yeah, there's nothing to do except try to extract more money from their current fans, because beyond like those insane, like, get $1 a Game Pass for a year for $1. Other than that, they're not convincing more people to get it. And I think those are basically gone at this point, although I really don't know what insane deals they're still doing.
Yeah, so I don't know. Just across the board, pretty much bad news over there. But let us now move on to the final reader mails. Grand Demand writes in and says, in Broken Silicon 271, your guest mentioned that Intel will be facing a legal price for false advertising regarding Raptor Lake failures. Do you think that part of Intel's consideration for not being more aggressive with voltage limits is that they will face harsher financial repercussions legally? At the 1.55 volt limit, there seems to be relatively minimal performance loss, but the actual safe limit is 1.5 volts or lower. Let's say that's the truth. What if restricting the voltage there would make it so that their chips no longer hit their advertised clocks? Maybe Intel is thinking it's worth it having the chips degrade a little bit over time, as long as they can't be sued for false advertising boost clocks. Yeah, I think your proposal is actually very plausible. I think it's very plausible that they think it'll be easier to get away with chips that break in 3 years in a lawsuit than it would be if they have to put out an update that makes it, even if it's just 100 megahertz, the CPU does not hit the advertised speeds. Anyone could sue and say, this was false advertisement. You sold me something I didn't get.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose if it's literally never hitting 5.7 gigahertz or something, that's a strong argument that I mean, that's
or 6 gigahertz.
yeah, or oh yeah, because they also have the 6 gigahertz advertising. Yeah, if it never hits those advertised clock speeds, that's, well, you've objectively done false advertising. And I don't know, maybe there's a more difficult to prove case with the degradation because, well, at what point is like all electronics degrade, all parts have some amount of failure rate. At what point does it cross into you're civilly liable?
Yeah, I think his proposal's totally plausible.
That makes sense to me.
Coach Freddy writes in and says, what do you think the fallout from Raptor Lake and Zen 5 could mean for the health of the PC gaming industry and its competition with consoles? Zero. I mean, I don't think Zen 5 having bad reviews is, stopping people from building gaming PCs. They're just going to buy Zen 4. They have to fix that. When it comes to Raptor Lake, I don't know. I think that just annoys a lot of people, and their next build will probably just be AMD if the Raptor Lake CPU broke. I don't see any of this being enough to make people flip to console for this reason alone.
Yeah, because if Zen 5 were like a bulldozer moment, okay, maybe we're talking about like a bunch of people are getting out of PC. But the fact of the matter is, Zen 4 still exists. Zen 4 is fine. Zen 5 will probably end up being fine in 3 months or 6 months.
By the time X3D is out, I'm sorry, guys. Like, think of it again. I mean, let me say this again. The 9800 X3D will be clocked faster than Zen 4 X3D. Additionally, I mean, we still see a 3 to 5% gaming performance uplift in Windows. Let's assume that isn't even fixed. Well, whatever. Multiply 4% by 4%, you're near a 10% performance uplift. That Zen 4 X3D is already, 5 to 10% faster than Raptor Lake in gaming usually. So it's going to be competitive with Arrow Lake in gaming, and it's going to be cheaper, use less energy. If they do fix even 5% more performance with patches, you're looking at Zen 5 X3D being totally capable of competing with Arrow Lake at a lower cost. I think what you're going to see is a dirge in sales now, but a boomerang early next year if that's when Zen 5 X3D comes out. And it's just going to continue the gravy train of people building 800 X3D desktops with RDNA 4 and maybe Blackwell. So I think long-term, even so arguably mid-term, this doesn't really affect anything. It just gives us a lot to talk about on podcasts for a couple hours. Which that's a joke you made, Dan, offline. I said, why did AMD do this? Look at this. They fixed it with this. Why did they release it now? And Dan, you said, well, we were starting to get bored of talking about Raptor Lake stability issues, so AMD thought they'd give us some more stuff to use for content.
I mean, really, it was a gift to tech tubers, Tom.
Compressed AI Blocks writes in and says, seems like Black Myth Wukong devs are the latest to warn about 13th and 14th gen instabilities. Yeah, again, think about how damaging this is. Like Alderon Games and the Black Myth Wukong devs, like they're putting warnings in the game when you boot up that says your CPU might not work. Like, imagine if you're an Intel owner and you're like, what? But anyways, and they're providing potential workarounds officially on their websites. The onus shouldn't fall upon developers. Have you heard anything on the Intel side acknowledging that the ring bus flaw is completely fixed in Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake in future generations? Lunar Lake, I think zero chance there's an issue. Can't say zero, it's Intel. Yeah. I think there's very little chance there's an issue with Lunar Lake. I think very little with Arrow Lake, so almost 0% with Lunar Lake, very low chance with Arrow Lake. And I've directly been told that nobody thinks there will be any problems with it. The way they've rearranged the ring bus, no. Even Meteor Lake Refresh, they're moving the cores around in the design, and Meteor Lake itself doesn't have issues. So all of these things, these are different architectures. They don't think they'll have the same issue. But again, I bet a bunch of people will want to wait a few months to find out.
Well, yeah, I doubt the Black Myth Wukong developers will be buying Intel 15th gen, or maybe they're getting away from that.
I guess it's called this 200 Ultra series, Dan.
Yeah, so I guess we're resetting generations now. I guess is what they're doing.
Trogaholic writes in and says, "Hi, Tom and Dan. Besides all of your Steam games working, what requirements do you have before considering a permanent switch to SteamOS or any other Linux distro for that matter?" Dan, why don't you go?
I mean, I would want to know that there's just support for most products that I use across the board, and I would want it to be as smooth or smoother experience than PC in general, because a big reason why even considered just stopped using PC altogether at times, is PC annoys the hell out of me. So if Linux is more annoying to use in general than PC, I don't want to use it. And that means compatibility issues with apps and video games. So I would just extend like app compatibility to that and general smoothness of the experience.
Yeah, and in preparation for this episode, one of the things that I watched was Wendell's one of his latest videos looking into Zen 5 issues. And I noticed there was one point there where he goes, for those people saying, well, we should just switch to Linux. It's like, I don't know. I mean, look, he goes, I compared which games ran and didn't run well on Linux versus Windows. And I actually found that were you to want to game on Windows, want to play these games, you'd be way better off playing on Linux with x86 than playing on ARM in Windows. Because despite what Qualcomm says, more games work on Linux, even if it requires workarounds, than work on ARM on Windows natively. So that's kind of a big deal, because I remember when it was like half to a third of your library would work on Linux. This suggests most of it does well now. But having said that, he's like, there's still weird things. He said, like, I think it might have been F1. He's like, here's this weird texture glitch here. And he's like, but, this isn't a big deal. Anyone would complain about that on a console. Their textures just didn't work in one part of a map. I mean,
yeah, that's insane.
So he's like, it's getting better. It's getting there. We're in a way different world when it comes to Linux as your main operating system if you're coming from Windows than we were a decade ago. But you're still probably going to run into a lot of just random weird issues. And he's like, I'd still think we need another 5 to 10 years, but it might be there by then. So that's what it would be. And my concern would just be I use a bunch of weird apps for editing, like that work perfect for me and for my workflow. And I would be worried that these non-entirely mainstream apps wouldn't work on Linux.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm looking to get off of Windows as soon as it becomes viable to me. So if someone tells me all of my games work, there aren't weird artifacts in games, and apps generally work as well as they do on Windows, sure, I'll switch to Linux. Because I mean, I don't think we've been shy about this. We don't exactly like Microsoft as a company. Sure.
Windows 11's been a disaster with OneDrive and what they've been trying to do with recall and all these ridiculous anti-consumer things.
Yeah, so like the second Linux becomes more viable, I'll happily switch to it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's tempting. Every time I see a crash or something like this Zen 5 launch, frankly, or just OneDrive just screwing up my girlfriend's PC. I mean, just deleting files. I would argue holding them hostage, like for a subscription. That's just so. I mean, look, I'm gonna say it's fucked up, But at the moment, I don't think it's quite ready for me to just jump into Linux. It'll be any smoother of a day for me. But I do think it could be in about 5 to 10 years, and if that were to happen, and I can use the operating system basically the same way, why not? If it works better, I'm goodbye Windows.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode, Dan. Unless you had anything else you wanted to talk about.
No, I don't think I did, Tom.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. But I will say this. Thank you for watching, everybody. Please remember to like this video, to subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel, and ring the bell button. And then also subscribe to Broken Silk on your podcast app of choice, and give us a review there as well. On whatever podcast app you use, special Apple podcast that gets recommended more for us there. And then, check out the other videos coming out. The new CDY is what we're calling it right now. It might be might change, but I think I like it. Cut down yields. It's where we basically do really high production value edits of a part of the podcast, usually in the last part of it, so that if most people watch half of a podcast, so what we're doing is taking the part we're pretty sure you missed that we know is really good, cutting it down, editing it well. So far, the overwhelming majority of the comments love it. And so that's awesome. But look at that. Check out our shorts. A lot more content coming that me and Gerard, Carmen Cry, and everyone else are working on. So, but yeah. And also just, make sure you join the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon if you have even an extra $2. I mean, there's a new die shrink that will be coming out, going over the revelations at Hot Chips this week. And those are always ad-free. And at the lowest tier, and you get access to a Discord to ask us questions. Kit Guru, Leo from Kit Guru's coming on in a week. You can ask him questions if you join. Cannot do this without our patrons. That is like the easiest way to contribute to the channel directly and make it so that our business model is just get delivering content to you. Besides that, I think that's going to just about do it. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carbon Cry and Carrie No Sugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Z-Jits, Daniel D, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, MJB1, SNES Chalmers, Jerem Ferreira, Valka Malev, Jensen Wang, Gregorius Acker, Sarcastro, Toka, Chris Rich, Compressed AI Blocks, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Buma, Shredbird, Holden Mobley, Sammy Malas, Jordan Simkovic, Julian Leak, The Boss Haas, Jonathan, Franco Frederick, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Christopher A. Butler, Zicky, Chrysantine, Stephen Hart, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Nithra Zink, Mads, Suit Taylor, Stephen Coates, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Gamers Unite, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Ishad, Mark Raidmaker, James Anderson, Cole Addict, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, D31337 Antics, Michelle Pell, Jamie Witters, Hexapuma, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Jeff Sedler, Windstar, Mai Sharona, Corey Leonard, James I, Raider, JSMMH, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, McDaffie, Stephen Dick, Winwing, Dave Schultz, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Jansen, Angima, Joseph Kelly, Slushbaugh, Him Sagung, Tails 2299, Mealval, Verga, John, Sisyphos 2771, The Forbidden Juice, RV Racer, Brian Wright, AC, Alex Vega, Dr. J Mad, Free D, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Crystal J Joe, Elbergun, Jolo Martina, Kikum, Solarized 80, Gian Violi, Matthew Morrow, Thalo 215, Jeffrey Gentleman, Lord Starscream, Brian P, Whodat 42, Cornster 671, Penta Winter, Rowan McKicky, Sprutnik, Angel of Cake, John Wick Boomstick, Omega Doge, Mr. Tiger, Porcelain Oath Swaggins, Curry King 3, Nick Zizmania, Sakosha, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.